Half young couple buys used car and discovers a shocking secret. Miranda, hurry up. Your mom's going to be mad if we're late again. George called out from the driver's seat, waiting for his girlfriend, Miranda. This wasn't unusual. She often took a bit longer to get ready and usually forgot something. While waiting, George admired their new car. Well, new to them. They had just bought it at a great price, and it was in fantastic shape. It was their first big purchase together, while marking a milestone in their relationship. Their next goal was buying a house, but that would take some time. Suddenly, George decided to check himself in the mirror. As he pulled down the visor, a piece of paper fell and slipped under the seat. Reaching for it, he found an old wallet instead. The paper was just an old bill, so he pocketed it. Curious, he looked inside the wallet and saw a man's driver's license, some essentials, and a few $20 bills. What caught his eye, though, was a picture of a little girl. He smiled at the photo, not noticing Miranda getting into the car. Come on, weren't you the one in a hurry? She laughed. George shook his head and started the engine. What's that? Miranda asked, pointing at the wallet. Oh, it must have belonged to the previous owner. He looks pretty young, huh? George said, handing it to her. Miranda examined it. That must be his daughter. She looks kind of familiar, like me, she remarked casually. Right? I thought the same. But lots of blonde girls look similar, George replied, focused on the road. We can call him later and see if he wants his wallet back. At dinner with Miranda's mom, George complimented the meal. Mrs. Francis was happy about their new car. Your old one looked pretty beat up, she said. Yeah, but this is Fort Lauderdale. The weather's mostly fine. No need to worry, George replied, recalling her concerns about their safety. It's better to have a reliable car, Mrs. Francis insisted with a smile. Miranda rolled her eyes, but was also glad about the new car. I found some of Miranda's old photo albums. Want to see them, George? Mrs. Francis offered. Sure, George replied enthusiastically, while Miranda groaned in embarrassment. As they looked through the albums, George was struck by one photo. Miranda, around 5 years old, looked exactly like the girl in the wallet's picture. He grew suspicious. Excuse me for a minute, he said, stepping outside. Miranda followed, worried. Look at this, George said, showing her the wallet. This girl looks exactly like you did back then. It's too much to be a coincidence. Wow, you're right, Miranda said, showing it to her mom. Mrs. Francis looked at the picture and sighed. You might be the girl in this picture, she said. You're adopted, Miranda. You were 5 when I adopted you. Miranda was shocked. Don't most 5-year-olds remember things? Wouldn't I know I was adopted? You did at first, but then you stopped talking about it. When you were 10, I hinted at your past, but you didn't remember. So we put off telling you, Mrs. Francis explained. So the man who sold us the car might be my biological father? Miranda asked, teary-eyed. It's possible, Mrs. Francis said. All we knew was a woman left you at the orphanage. Frank and I connected with you, so they let us adopt you quickly. I don't know what to do, Miranda cried on George's shoulder. Follow your heart. You have my support to reach out to him, Mrs. Francis encouraged. Let's call him, Miranda decided. George called the man who sold them the car and arranged a meeting. When Bob White arrived, he offered to check the car for free. George explained they found his old wallet and handed it to him. I lost this years ago. How did I miss it? Bob exclaimed, grateful for the photo inside. We wanted to talk about that photo, George said. Miranda stepped into the room. Bob studied her, confused. Have we met before? We think Miranda is the girl in that picture, George explained. That's impossible, Bob muttered, emotional. I lost my daughter, Clarabelle, years ago. Her mother took her and disappeared. I reported it, but the police couldn't help. You never heard from them again? George asked. No. I thought they might be dead, Bob said, tearing up. Do you think you're Clarabelle? My mom said I was 5 when adopted. A woman left me at an orphanage. I don't remember being called Clarabelle, Miranda said nervously. Maybe I should have asked around orphanages, Bob lamented. Miranda's a pretty name, too. They decided to get a DNA test, which confirmed Miranda was Bob's missing daughter. They hugged, with Mrs. Francis watching. Bob thanked her for caring for Miranda. Later, Bob asked Miranda if they could stay in touch. She agreed, and he became a big part of their lives. Years later, Bob walked her down the aisle when she married George.